there is not a single person in here who, had it not been for what was in the stimulus package, wouldn't be going home to more teachers laid off, more firefighters laid off, more cops laid off. A big chunk of it was unemployment insurance and COBRA, just making sure that people had some floor beneath them. And, by the way, making sure that there was enough money in their pockets that businesses had some customers. You take those two things out, that accounts for the majority of the stimulus package. Are there people in this room who think that was a bad idea? A portion of it was dealing with the AMT, the alternative minimum tax, not a proposal of mine. That's not a consequence of my policies that we have a tax system where we keep on putting off a potential. Tax hike that is embedded in the budget that we have to fix each year. That cost about $70 billion. And then the last portion of it was infrastructure, which, as I said, a lot of you have gone to appear at ribbon cuttings for the same projects that you voted against. Now, I say all this not to relitigate the past, but it's simply to state that the component parts of the Recovery Act are consistent with what many of you say are important things. To do rebuilding our infrastructure, tax cuts for families and businesses. And making sure that we were providing states and individuals some support when the roof was caving in. And the notion that I would somehow resist doing something that cost half as much but would produce twice as many jobs, why would I resist that? I wouldn't. I mean, that's my point, is that I am not an ideologue. I'm not. It doesn't make sense. If somebody could tell me you could do this cheaper and get increased results, that I wouldn't say, great. The problem is, I couldn't find credible economists who would back up the claims that you just made. Now, here's what I know going forward, though. I mean, we were talking about the past. We can talk about this going forward. I have looked at every idea out there in terms of accelerating job growth to match the economic growth that's already taken place. The jobs credit that I'm discussing right now is one that a lot of people think would be the most cost-effective way for encouraging people to pick up their hiring. There may be other ideas that you guys have. I am happy to look at them and I'm happy to embrace them. I suspect I will embrace some of them. Some of them I've already embraced. But the question I think we're going to have to ask ourselves is, as we move forward, are we going to be examining each of these issues based on what's good for the country, what the evidence tells us? Or are we going to be trying to position ourselves so that come November we're able to say, the other party, it's their fault? If we take the latter approach, then we're probably not going to get much agreement. If we take the former, I suspect there's going to be a lot of overlap. All right? Congressman Pence, Mr. President, will you consider supporting across-the-board tax relief, as President Kennedy did? President Obama, here's what I'm going to do, Mike. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at what you guys are proposing. And the reason I say this, before you say, okay, I think is important to know what you may consider across-the-board tax cuts could be. For example, greater tax cuts for people who are making $1 billion. I may not agree to a tax cut for Warren Buffett. You may be calling for an across-the-board tax cut for the banking industry right now. I may not agree to that. So I think that we've got to look at what specific proposals you're putting forward. And this is the last point I'll make. If you're calling for just across-the-board tax cuts, and then on the other hand saying that we're somehow going to balance our budget. I'm going to want to take a look at your math and see how that works. Because the issue of deficit and debt is another area where there has been a tendency for some inconsistent statements. How's that? All right. Congressman Ryan, thank you. Mr. President, first off, thanks for agreeing to accept our invitation here. It is a real pleasure and honor to have you with us here today. President Obama, good to see you. Is this your crew right here, by the way? Congressman Ryan, it is. This is my daughter Liza, my son Charlie and Sam, and this is my wife Jana. President Obama, hey, guys. Congressman Ryan, say hi, everybody. I serve as a ranking member of the Budget Committee, so I'm going to talk a little budget if you don't mind. The spending bills that you've signed into law. the domestic discretionary spending has been increased by 84%. You now want to freeze spending at this elevated beginning next year. This means that total spending in your budget would grow at 3/100 ths of 1% less than otherwise. I would simply submit that we could do more and start now. You've also said that you want to take a scalpel to the budget and go through it line by line. We want to give you that scalpel. I have a proposal with my home state senator. Russ Feingold, bipartisan proposal, to create a constitutional version of the line item veto. Problem is, we can't even get a vote on the proposal. So my question is, why not start freezing spending now? And would you support a line item veto in helping us get a vote on it in the House? President Obama, let me respond to the two specific questions. But I want to just push back a little bit on the underlying premise about us increasing spending by 84%. Now, look, I talked to Peter Orszag right before I came here. Because I suspected I'd be hearing this argument. The fact of the matter is that most of the increases in this year's budget this past year's budget were not as a consequence of policies that we initiated but instead were built in. As a consequence of the automatic stabilizers that kick in because of this enormous recession. So the increase in the budget for this past year was actually predicted. Before I was even sworn into office and had initiated any policies. Whoever was in there, Paul, and I don't think you'll dispute that whoever was in there would have seen those same increases because of, on the one hand, huge drops in revenue, but at the same time people were hurting and needed help. And a lot of these things happened automatically. Now, the reason that I'm not proposing the discretionary freeze take into effect this year, we prepared a budget for 2010, it's now going forward is, again, I am just listening to the consensus among people who know the economy best. And what they will say is that if you either increase taxes or significantly lowered spending when the economy remains somewhat fragile, that would have a destimulative effect, and potentially you'd see a lot of folks losing business, more folks potentially losing jobs. That would be a mistake when the economy has not fully taken off. That's why I propose to do it for the next fiscal year. So that's point number 2. With respect to the line item veto, I think there's not a president out there that wouldn't love to have it. And I think that this is an area where we can have a serious conversation. I know it is a bipartisan proposal by you and Russ Feingold. I don't like being held up with big bills that have stuff in them that are wasteful, but I've got to sign because it's a defense authorization bill and I've got to make sure that our troops are getting the funding that they need. I will tell you, I would love for Congress itself to show discipline on both sides of the aisle. I think one thing that you have to acknowledge, Paul, because you study this stuff and take it pretty seriously, that the earmarks problem is not unique to one party and you end up getting a lot of pushback when you start. Going after specific projects of any one of you in your districts, because wasteful spending is usually spent somehow. Outside of your district. Have you noticed that? The spending in your district tends to seem pretty sensible. So I would love to see more restraint within Congress. I'd like to work on the earmarks reforms that I mentioned in terms of putting earmarks online. Because I think sunshine is the best disinfectant. But I am willing to have a serious conversation on the line item veto issue. Congressman Ryan, I'd like to walk you through that, because we have a version we think is constitutional. President Obama, let me take a look at it. Congressman Ryan, I would simply say that automatic stabilizer spending is mandatory spending. The discretionary spending, the bills that Congress signs that you sign into law, that has increased 84%. President Obama, we'll have a longer debate on the budget numbers, all right? Congressman Pence, Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia. Congresswoman Capito, thank you, Mr. President, for joining us here today. As you said in the State of the Union address on Wednesday, jobs and the economy are number one. And I think everyone in this room, certainly I, agree with you on that. I represent the state of West Virginia. We're resource rich. We have a lot of coal and a lot of natural gas. but our miners and the folks who are working and those who are unemployed are very concerned about some of your policies in these areas. Cap and trade, an aggressive EPA, and the looming prospect of higher taxes. In our minds, these are job-killing policies. So I'm asking you if you would be willing to relook at some of these policies. With the high unemployment and the unsure economy that we have now, to assure West Virginians that you're listening.